my name is Owen. Today I'll be doing a quick review of Derek Bailey's The Voidwalker Collection. What I want to do is give a brief overview of what the book is about, tell you things that I liked, and tell you the things that I didn't like. But a quick disclaimer, Derek did reach out to me all the way back in January, and he sent me a free copy of his book to review, but that in no way means that I'm being paid to give a biased or positive review. Derek is a friend of the channel. However, I want to give him my honest opinions. That's what he deserves, and that's what you guys deserve if you're watching this. But jumping straight into the overview, this is a collection of 8 short stories. It's kind of fantasy, a little bit of horror, a little bit of thriller, and a lot of mystery, and a little bit of gore as well, but mostly in that thriller mystery with a spice of fantasy genre. And it was described in like Derek's first email to me that the collection reads like a Netflix series watches if you see each short story as like an episode in this world. And I definitely agree with that. And jumping into things that I liked and didn't like, this format has its benefits and it has its drawbacks as well. I would say the biggest drawback for me was there was kind of like a cyclical nature to these short stories where like, or I mean not cyclical, but it was kind of like there was like a cookie cutter format to each of these stories, especially the early ones where the main character, Brian, would be exploring this fantasy world. He'd be a little bit confused, and he'd be thrown back to his real world, and he's kind of like a little bit dazzled or confused about what's happened in his dream. Was it a dream? What's the mystery? And he goes about his regular life, and then when he goes back to sleep, he's going to get thrown back in this world. In the first, I would say 3 or even 4 short stories kind of follow that same pattern. And the problem with that is when you finish like one, and they do come to like concrete stops because they were written as short stories, it didn't really give me a lot of momentum to like drive into the next one because you kind of see like the rhythm of it. However, I would also say that in some ways, while I didn't like let me binge read, like I would maybe like binge watch a Netflix show, I think these stopping points actually helped me as a reader because it allowed for perfect stopping points. This book was fairly long with all 8 short stories together. I think it was around like 500 or so pages on my Kindle, but it gave me like concrete stopping points where I knew if I jumped in at the start of a short story, the author would pull me right back into the world and make me feel like I hadn't missed a beat. So that was actually really refreshing, especially because I was reading so many other things at the time. I didn't feel like I had to go back and like reread earlier short stories. Like just an anecdote, I've been reading Trust the Emerald Sea since the beginning of January, so slightly longer than I was first given this collection of short stories. And I tried to start reading it again, and I'm struggling a little bit because I just don't really remember. But I never had a problem with that in terms of these short stories, because kind of like it's an episode. It's a full story in one, and you could stop there, but the mystery is what keeps you going to the next one. And even though there wasn't like direct momentum, like I got to start reading the next one, because it was like pre-packaged smaller portion short stories, it was almost easier to like put it away for a while, if that makes sense. And it's kind of a weird benefit, but it's just something that like, because I was reading it over such a long period of time, it was really refreshing that I didn't feel like I was ever lost in the story, which is also a credit to the writing as well. In terms of other things that didn't necessarily work for me, this isn't really a thing that didn't work, but it's kind of funny. The main character, especially for the first 4 or 5 short stories, is insufferable. Brian Daly, I hated him so much, and I was really worried for Derek there for a little bit, because I'm like, maybe he thinks this guy's supposed to be like really charming, or not charming, but like likable, but he's just kind of like an asshole. And I'm like, this guy is so unlikable, and I'll get why like I still kept with it in the strengths, but I'm like, I'm really worried about like, because this character is not likable at all. But luckily, that was kind of the point, and it was about his personal growth. In the latter half, he really works on improving himself, so it all worked out. But I was really concerned there for a little bit, and it led me to like almost wishing on his downfall, especially for the first half, which I don't know if I was supposed to be doing. And the other thing that didn't necessarily work for me is there are a lot of characters thrown into these short stories, and maybe it's because I took so long to read it, but I kind of got lost in the names and the people, especially in like the dream world. There's portions at the end where it's like a gathering of all the people that he's met, and a lot of the names I just did not recall. And like some of like the main characters, like Miles, he's got his guns as his signature characteristics, and Jack is the kid. There are very many distinct personalities that Brian meets in his journey, but a lot of them I felt were unmemorable and probably could have been combined into like maybe like 3 or 4 of them combined into one character, because especially into the action sequences, I kind of got lost a lot because it was this person does this person does this, and like the author would update us on what every single person was doing in that fight scene. And because I couldn't even picture what their backstory was, what the personality was like, I kind of got lost in the fight scenes. So it's a little bit muddled in terms of characters, and it's made the fight scenes just a little messy to read for me. But thankfully, the characters that we're supposed to like actually care about, I felt anyway, were very standout. Eventually, while I did not like Brian, he was entertaining to read, even from the beginning. Like I said, Miles, Jack, very entertaining. Even Kayla, Brian's girlfriend, even though she was kind of insufferable at times, I enjoyed reading her perspective. And going into the things that I liked, in addition to the characters, I think Derek Bailey's strongest points, especially in the first couple short stories, is actually the real world parts of these short stories. Like, obviously the mystery is involved in this dream world that Brian like keeps waking up in, like what's going on in the mystery. It's kind of what drives the plot forward. But I think the author did such a great job of making realistic conflict in like a real person way with like this fantasy background. With Brian's conflicts with his friends and his girlfriend and his job, they felt really realistic to me, and the way that they spoke to each other about these problems felt very human to me. And I was actually, in some points, more invested in Brian's relationship with his girlfriend over that of like these mystical magic powers that's happening every time Brian goes to sleep. And eventually, once that starts to get fleshed out and the mystery starts to be uncovered, I was a little bit more engaged in that aspect. But for the part where it's just really confused, we're confused along with Brian, I was really engaged in his real life stories, and I almost wished that it was just about this guy struggling through his personal relationships, because especially towards the latter half, when it gets more action-oriented, dog cameo, gets more action-oriented, I did start to lose it with all like the characters and proper nouns. But the story itself as a core was very strong and very engaging, and I think that base of strong characters with strong motivations and personal relationships really allowed me to invest myself in this fantasy mystery, which I think just alone, if it was just this manor in this mysterious dream world, I don't know if I would have been as bought into it. But because the author did such a great job in like the real life portions, I was bought in. And I think, Derek, if you're listening, I think you should write like some real life stuff, because that was so engaging for me. And listen, throw in some fantasy flair because everybody loves some, but I think that was really strong. I think those are the strongest part of the writing was the real life, mundane, everyday stuff. But yeah, that was probably the biggest benefit for me. That was it for my review. I definitely recommend it. You guys know on the channel, I've done a couple reviews of indie authors now, and I highly recommend that if you guys have the opportunity to support these authors, you absolutely do so. It's very, very hard to write a book, and the fact that Derek Bailey has succeeded in writing 8 short stories that come into a cohesive narrative is so impressive and such an accomplishment. So congratulations to you, Derek, and I'll put the link to the Voidwalker Collection in the description of this video, and I recommend that everybody checks it out and give your own opinion about the matter. That's all I got. Thanks for sticking around. Be sure to like and subscribe for more book reviews. You know I keep them coming. Thanks, guys.